So my name is Maurice Button. I'm the CEO of City and Financial, and it's my pleasure to be interviewing Graeme Cooper, who is Head of Future Markets and National Grid Electricity Transmission. My first question to you, Graeme, is do you think that COP26 has given a significant push to the rollout of EVs and EV charging infrastructure across the world?
What COP has really done is demonstrated a real consideration for urgency, so pushing for higher targets, but also what was interesting at COP26 was both money and industry looking to push forward to actually deliver against those targets. So I think actually COP has been incredibly helpful to focus hearts and minds around moving the dial on moving just from words into delivery.
The Prime Minister announced mandatory EV charging points for new buildings and that these will come in 3 years earlier than expected. Is this a game changer?
If you start to see new builds having EV chargers and being future ready, or actually current ready, then actually you start to see that social piece where people will go, well, I've got a charger and I'm getting a car. That will drive actually that normalization process an uptick. So I think it's incredibly helpful. The only thing I've got a small concern around is, should it be actually deploying a charger or being make ready? I think there's an element here that actually, if you leave it to developers, they will just go with the cheapest answer. I think as we move forward, there's an element of people will want smart and clever chargers to help them manage their charging.
How do we tackle the lack of charging points for existing housing stock and for rental properties, leasehold properties, and blocks of flats? And do we need to amend existing planning and perhaps other law?
So in my local authority area, I know they're actively considering having a pre-qualifier for planning applications. If you want to, add an extension, what are you doing around provision of clean transport, as a consideration? So that could drive you to actually say, well, as part of doing an extension on the back of my house, I'm going to put a charger on the front. That is one of those ways where I think there's some localism could really, really help drive some of those changes. And it doesn't necessarily mean you need big government.
Is the rollout of public charging points keeping up with the rate of EV adoption by the public? And if not, how can this be remedied?
But don't forget, we're still only, Maurice, at 2% of the cars on the road in the UK have a plug on them. So we're still in that, we're still early adopter stage.
Is there a lack of finance for EV charging infrastructure? And if so, are there steps that could be taken that might address this?
For things like public charge points, I think what we need is certainty. Certainty lowers the risk, that risk appetite for money. And so actually, by having big statements at COP, those big statements becoming UK-centric targets and legally bound targets, and those driving policy, and that policy certainty actually dials out risk. And as that risk comes down, there's a point at which investment will step forward and say, it's now de-risked enough for that capital to come forward. So I think for me at the moment, what we're seeing is quite a lot of VC type money jumping in the more risky areas. And that's right. I mean, that's a betting game. But I think when we're now looking to really scale the transition, that de-risking and unlocking more patient capital, that sort of pension type fund capital, is going to be really important. And that's just starting to come. I mean, you've seen it in EVs with the end of the sale of petrol and diesel cars by 2030. So it's a very strong line in the sand. But also, we're now seeing it. So at COP26 on the Wednesday of COP, which was Transport Day, the UK announced that they're ending the sale of diesel trucks by 2035. So actually, even in the heavier stuff, the bigger and heavier and more difficult to fix stuff, there's now a line in the sand. So that means industry can make plans, and hopefully that will help unlock some of that capital to deploy.
Very good. Many thanks for sharing those insights with us, Graeme. Thank you.
Thank you very much.